In August of 1991, a Youth with a Mission team led by founder and president Loren Cunningham embarked on a journey to one of the most remote countries on Earth. By way of mercy ship Pacific Rubi, the team traveled to a small island 2,170 kilometers east-southeast of Tahiti. The island is 3.2 kilometers long by 1.6 kilometers wide, with a current population of only 55. The team's purpose was to serve the needs of the country in a very practical way through doctors, nurses, dentists, engineers, and teachers. This journey would complete Youth with a Mission's goal of ministering to every country in the world. This is the story of a journey to a tiny island that forever changed the lives of those who ventured to its distant shores. For some, the journey to Pitcairn begins here at the airport in Kona, Hawaii. But for a few, like Loren Cunningham, founder of Youth with a Mission, the journey began years ago with a vision. And now it seems that vision is soon to become a glorious reality. So it is with mounting excitement that the eager Youth with a Mission team boards the small plane for Mangareva in the Gambier Islands, where they'll make contact with the motor vessel Pacific Rubi for the 2-day sail to Pitcairn. In the excitement, little thought is given to the fact that the team nearly outnumbers the people living on that tiny spot of land. In Mangareva, a small island of 800 people in French Polynesia, the team learns that strong headwinds have prevented the Pacific Rubi from arriving on schedule. And the group, weary now from the many hours of travel, contemplates the effects of this minor setback as they wait for news of the vessel's arrival. Since the airport is located on a small reef off Gambier, the team boards a launch for the trip to the main island. At Gambier, the local officials seem concerned that such a large number of visitors might overwhelm the small island's facilities. But those concerns vanish when a small rubber boat appears, manned by crewmen from the Pacific Rubi. Rough seas and the dangerous reefs have kept the vessel from entering the harbor. The group arranges for transportation out to the ship by means of local fishermen, some of whom display an amazing agility in operating their small craft. Gone now is the travel weariness and the minor disappointment over the delay of the Pacific Rubi, as the YWAM team makes its way aboard the vessel and is reunited with team members who had boarded the ship earlier in Tahiti. Now, the excitement mounts for Loren and David Cunningham, the ship's director, as the reality of the journey suddenly takes on dramatic new dimensions. And as crew members recount the difficulties of negotiating the treacherous reefs, the last fishing boat pulls away. Next morning, with nothing between the Pacific Rubi and Pitcairn Island but the open sea, a sense of reliving a page out of history heightens the air of expectation. At the wheel, the able helmsman steers a true course for Pitcairn, while in the galley, mess officers prepare mouth-watering meals that would surely tame the unruly crew of the HMS Bounty. Passengers and crew alike while away the time in the lounge, eating or exchanging stories as they cope with the mounting anticipation of reaching their final destination. While on deck, others, as landlubbers have done for centuries, try out their newfound sea legs, while still others are lost in their own reveries, perhaps seeing ghostly images of the British naval vessel that plied these very waters some 200 years ago. An expert on that subject is Dr. Herbert Ford, director of the Pitcairn Island Study Center of Pacific Union College in California. He gives freely of his time and information and describes the history of this tiny island mass that was discovered in 1767 by a British naval officer and was named after the common sailor who first sighted it. He tells the story of the famous mutiny.
In the latter part of the year 1789, the HMS Bounty, a 90-foot vessel of the British Admiralty, was in these very waters right here. She had aboard a lot of breadfruit plants that were going to be carried to the West Indies, but a mutiny had occurred over in the Tongan Islands, and the sailors that mutinied against Captain William Bligh decided to bring the ship over this way to look for a place to hide. They had seen on the Admiralty maps this little dot of land called Pitcairn Island that we will be arriving at in just a few more hours. And they felt that that might be a safe place for them to hide from British justice. Because in the British Navy in those days, you didn't mutiny and get away with it. And so they brought the Bounty over, 9 of the mutineers and a number of Tahitian women and men, and found that the island was a fertile island, had water, and promised to be a home for them that was very good. The Bounty, of course, had sailed in 1788 from Deptford in England, and the purpose was to come out to Tahiti and gather breadfruit plants and take those plants back to the West Indies so that a cheap source of food for the slaves on the British plantations in the West Indies could be found. Well, of course, the stay in Tahiti to gather those breadfruit plants was about 5 months, and the men were all put ashore, all the sailors. And they forgot the harsh discipline of the British Navy, and they made some friendships with the young ladies of the island there. So when they put to sea again with all the breadfruit plants aboard, they didn't like the way Captain Bligh was asking them to obey very quickly. And after a bit, actually on April 28 of 1789, they mutinied against him and put Bligh and 18 loyal men to him adrift in one of the boats off the Bounty. They sent them out and thought they'd never see them again. They thought they would stop in at an island and be eaten by the cannibals on those islands, because most of the islands of that area were cannibalistic at that time. But Bligh was a very special sailor. Whatever else we might say about him, he had learned navigation from the great explorer, Captain Cook, and he had learned how to take care of men. And he navigated that little tiny boat across 4,000 miles of open ocean to Batavia in the western part of the Pacific, and then made his way back to England. So it's quite a sea story, and one that the whole world has taken note of many, many times. And to this very remote little tiny island, Pitcairn's Island, is where the story ended up, really.
Captain Bligh's career suffered not at all from the mutiny, and he was ultimately promoted to Vice Admiral of the Royal Navy. But the history of Pitcairn has been less spectacular.
For me, the significance of going into the little island of Pitcairn is, first of all, it's the last country on earth where YWAM has never ministered before. So we're taking medical personnel ashore to minister to them, dentists and hygienists, as well as a doctor and a nurse, and we're taking various kinds of skills, and we're wanting to minister to the people of Pitcairn. But to think of it as being the last place, the last country, it lets me know that the excitement that I feel is what happened as just a boy of 13. I had the sense that somehow we were going to minister into every country of the world. And now, anticipating that only a few hours offshore of the little island of Pitcairn where Mutiny on the Bounty took place, it's just something very special to me.
As the Ruby plows steadily onward, crew members see to the routine chores that occupy sailors the world over, while eager eyes search for the first glimpse of Pitcairn Island. Then, with the dawn, comes the long-awaited sight, soon to be followed by a welcome to the island from Betty Christian, a sixth-generation descendant of mutineer Fletcher Christian.
Greetings, Mr. Cunningham. I'd like to pass on official greetings from the island magistrate, who at the present time is J. Warren. J. Warren is the island magistrate. And he has asked to officially welcome all of you on board the Pacific Rubi to Pitcairn Island, and to let you know that we're all looking forward very much to your arrival, and hope that it will be a most enjoyable stay for all of you as well as all of us.
I'm feeling very privileged to be here and to actually see the physical features of the island. They're even more rugged than I had heard they were. You know, to fall off of one of those cliffs would not make anybody happy, of course. And to think that a little band of people for over 200 years has made this their home. Little Rock of the West, as they call it.
Now the time everyone has dreamed of is at hand. There's almost a sense of urgency as the longboat approaches the Pacific Rubi.
Now the longboat's coming out. Woo-hoo! With the people on board from Pitcairn. Yep.
Under Dr. Ford's watchful eye, islanders in the longboat prepare to disembark. On board the vessel, the welcome is warm and sincere as islanders greet friends and relatives who are also traveling on the Rubi. Loren talks with Tom Christian, a sixth-generation descendant of the Bounty's first mate, while Jesse discusses safe anchorage with an islander, and two others keep the longboat secure. And now Dr. Ford talks with Tom, whom he has been communicating with by radio for many years. And Loren reviews the Youth with a Mission team's itinerary with the local pastor. Supplies for the island are offloaded in preparation for the final leg of the journey. As the team boards the longboat, it's as though they're stepping into a time 200 years ago, when another larger craft made its lonely way to what is today the smallest British protectorate in the world. Amid eager, smiling faces, all eyes are fixed on the final destination as the Pitcairn dock looms ever closer across Bounty Bay. A plain sign says it all, simply and sincerely. Now Loren goes ashore, his lifelong vision about to become reality. Other YWAM team members follow. Then Dr. Ford sets foot on the island he knows so intimately, but has never before seen with his own eyes. But this latter-day mutineer and some other islanders seem to take the team's arrival a bit more casually. Once on the island, some team members discover the meaning behind the name Hill of Difficulty. Others take advantage of the all-terrain vehicles, which are the island's main form of transportation. Bounty Bay, the small inlet on the island's north coast, has changed little over the years, save for the construction of a permanent dock. And the same is true of the dirt road that winds up the Hill of Difficulty. Now home to fewer than 60 people, Pitcairn has been so overpopulated in the past that on 2 occasions, all the islanders moved away. Both times, however, some returned to reestablish the community. The early settlers on Pitcairn were beset by years of violence, bloodshed, and sickness, until only one mutineer, John Adams, remained. Adams learned how to read using the HMS Bounty's Bible and Church of England Book of Common Prayer. Later, he became the colony's spiritual leader and taught the 20 or so children to read using that same ship's Bible. Then in 1890, most of the Pitcairners became Seventh-day Adventists. The original HMS Bounty anchor is on display at the island's only settlement, which is complete with post office, library, dispensary, and public hall, and is named after the colony's early leader. Life on Pitcairn, though not easy today, was once far more primitive and saw the use of wooden hand-rowed longboats. And prior to mechanized transport, the notorious Hill of Difficulty lived up to its name in spades. Tom Christian is the great-great-great-grandson of mutineer leader Fletcher Christian. Tom, his wife Betty, and their children have lived on Pitcairn their entire lives in this family home. But today, the island is again struggling for its very existence.
Today, our population here is only between 50 and 60 people. It becomes a little difficult at times to get all the work done to keep the island going. But we seem to get by, and the Lord has been so very good to us over the years. I've seen some marvelous happenings of being able to get through heavy seas, get medical help when we so much needed it, and I'm sure that the Lord has helped us tremendously in answering prayers throughout the years.
Now the work of Youth with a Mission begins in earnest. The remainder of the diesel fuel carried by the Pacific Rubi is brought to the dock to be hoisted on shore. Team members help paint the church. Everyone pitches in, spurred on by a schedule cut in half due to the headwinds encountered on the way to the island. Dr. and Mrs. Johnson, assisted by the local nurse, perform abdominal surgery. The fortunate islander is soon moved into a recovery area to make room for the next patient. And while Dr. Johnson is busy repairing bodies, Jean-Claude, chief engineer from the Pacific Rubi, works at repairing engines, which are vital to the operation of the island's fishing boats, indeed, vital to its very future.
The island of Pitcairn, I believe, is an island with a future. Now, some will point to the fact that it's dying, numbers and age-wise, but I would like to say that I believe that Pitcairn can live again. I believe Pitcairn has a destiny. It has a voice like no other country in the world, because everyone's intrigued with Mutiny on the Bounty and how the country began and how the people hid out and won against the big ones of the day of 1790, which was Great Britain at that time.
Though discovered in 1767, and despite its rugged natural beauty, Pitcairn survived in obscurity until it was rediscovered by American whalers in 1808. Then, about 1831, the island became a port of call for whalers and passenger ships sailing between the United States and Australia. Many of the island's original inhabitants can still be found, including the infamous breadfruit, along with vegetables and exquisite flowers. But not all the current residents are descendants of the original Tahitians and mutineers, and most islanders are merely content to enjoy the simple pleasures afforded by the leisurely pace of life on Pitcairn. A life that still features quaint technology and customs long since absent from more advanced Western societies.
Where's y'all in? What's y'all doing then? Yeah. You don't think she
Yet some features of this remote community would be hard to improve on anywhere in the world, even 5,000 miles away. Like most places, Pitcairn is made up of families, and families mean children, and children mean school. This is the Pitcairn Public School, which provides for education through the 8th grade. Beyond that basic level, the island's children travel to schools in Australia or New Zealand. But for most island residents, the simple life on Pitcairn remains its own reward and satisfaction. The Cunningham family takes a brief time out from their hectic schedule to tour the island, courtesy of the local pastor, Rick Ferret. Meanwhile, the dental team drills away, and technicians Charlie and Donna take advantage of every precious moment, as does the eye care team, Leona and Hillary. And as the team dentist grinds at one form of decay, nature exhibits decay of another kind, as this old cannon from the Bounty slowly rusts away. Nightlife on Pitcairn, especially for the young, centers around the local cooperative store, which is only open one night a week. The co-op depends on passing ships to maintain its supply of goods. This rather erratic chain of distribution often leads to shortages, or to some supplies being out of stock for weeks or months on end. The Pitcairn Post Office is opened in the evening, especially for the YWAM visitors. The famous Pitcairn stamps, printed by Crown agents in London, have for years been favorites among collectors everywhere due to their design and limited availability, and they represent a significant source of income for the island. A gathering at the church is led in worship by the Pacific Rubi's pastor, John Rush. Later, Loren Cunningham shares news of Youth with a Mission and events of God's works around the world. But now time grows short as the team's last night on shore is at hand. Locals, as well as team members, feel a bittersweet excitement. And the children, as they do the world over, react to the prospects of a farewell party. With typical Pitcairn hospitality, the Islanders prepare a community dinner. For some, the enjoyment of the meal helps them forget, for the moment, the goodbye soon to come. And later, the Cunninghams offer the team a last look at the Pitcairn flag.
I think Pitcairn will keep going and going as long as the will of the people remains strong. This is their island and they're not going to let it up. Spiritually, it's like I said before, the people need to grab hold of and grip Jesus and hang on to him. It is hard to express your faith in isolation. Who do you witness to? These are some of the needs. If people around the world could pray for avenues of witness to be open to us, for ways in which we can activate and motivate a way of proclaiming on this island here. Christianity to be seen on this island, it seems as though the work that is done in a practical way for God speaks much more volumes than the spoken word. So what you've done in coming out will prove a real benefit in the years to come. People will talk about the Pacific Rubi and the Youth with a Mission and think they painted our church. The dental team fixed my teeth. Very practical.
Now there's only time for quick farewells and some last-minute pictures. In the bay, the Pacific Rubi lies at anchor, awaiting departure. And the dream, the vision that was so long in becoming reality, is soon to become history. As it was when the journey began, last-minute preparations generate a sense of excitement. But this time, it's tinged with sadness at leaving newfound friends. And as the Islanders wave goodbye, it's hard to escape the profound tug of history that lingers over this small island and in the sea that surrounds it. Hard not to wonder how the original Islanders must have felt as they watched other boats depart so many years ago. A shout from the Ruby, and passenger Sosini Liao, proudly displaying his catch, brightens the mood, and the team prepares to reboard the vessel in anticipation of getting underway. Amid final goodbyes and lingering embraces, strains of a traditional Pitcairn hymn of farewell swell up from the departing longboat. Now the Youth with a Mission team that came to minister to Pitcairn is filled with the realization that it is they and not the Islanders who were truly blessed by this journey to the last country.